Yeah, my film is about the immense poetry of noise, you could say. So noise is something that I've always been interested in, as something that's always out there and it's always surrounds us. It's in everything and especially in everything new. I think I'm not really bound to any discipline. One could say I am a musician creating films, or I'm a visual artist creating music. But what combines all these practices of mine, I think, is that they're time-based. So I create a certain narrative, no matter if it's for a live concert or for the movie theater screen. So my work is quite flat. So it's as well in the time domain, which means it for the exhibition space, for example, it can be repeated endlessly, but also spatially, it's quite flat in the sense that it can change its aspect ratio very easily, so it's usually presented in different formats with multiple projections, while in the cinema you have standard formats, standard aspect ratios. With this film, with this new one, I think it's more for the cinema. It's really, it's in CinemaScope, it can't change its aspect ratio. It's really meant to be seen from the beginning to the end. So this changes a little with this one. Most of my inspiration comes from reading, really. So I love to read poetry, philosophy, or some intelligent novel. And what I find the most interesting, though, I think these days is reading interviews with very old artists. So it's fascinating to me to sometimes get a glimpse of what they've been into their whole lives and in which processes they've been into to create their vast body of work that they usually have. First always comes the image, so I create the visual side first, which already, as I talked about, there's a very musical component to my work. So I create a narrative of a visual composition, or whatever you would call it, and then I create the sound composition to it. So I've always been using the computer from a very young age. I've been using the computer, so also it's been my only tool for everything I create ever since. And so with my artistic practice, I think what I did is to further and further unfold the aesthetic principles of what is behind these machines that surround us. What I'm interested in is noise again, and so the reference to Tron merely comes from the fact that Ken Perlin, as a mathematician, he developed the Perlin noise algorithm, which is now everywhere. In every little generative artwork you see, there is this kind of algorithm, as well as I could say, and that's a bit simplified of course, but in this action cinema there is always explosions and there's always fire, and so fire is nothing else than noise, so that the movement behind fire is noise, as well as the ocean is noise. We've been caught, I would say, in this kind of retro aesthetic for quite some time now, and that's clearly not what I'm interested in. I definitely try to go out there and create something new, even if that's almost impossible, or at least try to position myself in a way of generating something and not being based so much on previous work. On the other hand, I think it has some kind of also liberty to not necessarily always having to create something new out there anymore, but we can just use everything that's been going on as a tool. So even if you work abstract, you can't work abstract these days anymore without thinking about the abstraction that's been going on since the early 20th century. So it's in a way not that it's not abstract anymore in itself, as in like it just wants to depict nothing because it always has to reference previous work. A good film, it needs to hold back, I think. I don't want to understand everything, and it needs to have quite a lyrical quality, but has to be intelligent at the same time, especially on the visual side.